So my name is Craig Darlymple. I am a senior systems engineer for brightsolid in Dundee in Scotland, as you can tell from the accent, not from around here. Before I start, please read this new slide. I found this on Twitter just yesterday. Feel free to take any photos, share any content, get it out there in the community. This is a community session after all. Anything you hear in here, feedback to me, Twitter, Slack, email, whatever. Feel free to do whatever with the content you want. It is community content. Get it in the community and share it. This is what it's all about. Everybody got that? Okay, so this session, hopefully you're all here, is for making your first REST API call to VMware. Has anybody used REST APIs on VMware before? Ah, good, you're on the right place then. Used REST APIs with anything before? Just to try. Okay, good. Well, hopefully you learn something new today, take away some valuable information. So when I talk about making REST API calls, I don't mean making API calls. Does everybody know the film? Everybody? Yep. Good. So before I go into the overview of what I'm going to talk about, give you my history of REST APIs. So I'm not a developer by any. I don't have a man bun or beard, wear fluorescent leggings, or drink mocha chaka lattes and play table tennis. I'm an engineer at heart, and a few years ago I was working on a project for Veeam. I am a Veeam Vanguard, so I was working on a community project looking at creating dashboards for looking at backup failures, repository sizes and stuff like that. And I was using Powershell commands, using the Veeam Powershell snapping, sorry. And I was running it against my environment, and it was taking 5 to 6 minutes to run against my environment. And I thought, that's far too long. So I got to thinking, as an engineer, there has to be a better way to make this simpler, easier, faster. So somebody suggested looking at the Veeam Enterprise Manager REST API, which did the job. My calls went down, my script went down from 5 to 6 minutes to, I think it was like 30 to 45 seconds. So it was a lot quicker. Same information, but a lot quicker. So I got thinking, I wonder if VMware has a REST API. And they just introduced that in vSphere 6.5. So this is what's got me. So this presentation is my journey to how to use REST APIs, what I've learned along the way. Hopefully it helps you pick up a few tips and some useful tricks to get you started on your way. So the session is going to be a little bit explaining what a REST API is, what is REST, talking about the explanation, the verbs, the anatomy of the REST call, response codes, talking about VMware REST sources, particularly vCenter 6.7, although it did come in 6.5, we're going to talk about the latest one. Swagger UI, a little bit about the new client developer update in the agent. Show you a couple of tools, a couple of tricks for making your first REST API calls, what tools, talk about authentication, tokens, and the difference between invoke REST method and invoke web request for PowerShell. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to do some live demos on my lab up in the cloud. So what is REST or RESTful? You hear people talking about RESTful APIs these days. It actually stands for Representational State Transfer. So what does that mean? It's actually a framework of constraints designed for networked applications, not networking applications or network applications, but networked applications, typically on HTTP, HTTPS. And it treats server objects as resources of representations that can be created, read, updated, and destroyed. CRUD, has anybody heard of the CRUD? No, created, read, updated, and deleted, or destroyed. Can be used by a wide range of programming languages. You can use Perl, Python, Curl, PowerShell, Ruby, you name it, you can use it. There's probably a REST method for that. And it relies on stateless client-server protocol, typically HTTP and HTTPS. So I talked about the constraints. It's a framework of 6 constraints for designing REST APIs. For this session, all we're going to concentrate on are 2, stateless and client-server. So stateless. Stateless means that everything that you are looking for is contained within the REST call. There's no processing on the back end of the system, on the API server. Everything's within your call. Usually part of the URI, unique resource identifier, the query string parameters, the body or the headers. Depending on who the API author is, there's different methods for doing that. So for example, Here we have a get HTTPS. It's a Twitter API call. If I go here, this part here is talking about a date. He's given a specific date, looking for his tweets, his direct messages, and then he's filtering it down to just the last one. So that is everything that was contained within that query string for the system. The system just gets that query and goes, oh, it's X, Y, or Z, whatever the number is. So client server is simple. Client makes an HTTP request, server responds with an HTTP response, or HTTPS typically. This means that the client and the server API, so the client application can be developed independently of the server API because there's no dependency on either of them. So you can use any API, REST API client underneath. It doesn't have to be specific to the API server. So REST uses HTTP verbs. Everybody knows what a verb is. It's a doing word. So typically you're going to use 4 to 5 basic verbs when you're using REST APIs. So those are, there's a full list at this URL, but post, get, not get as in GitHub, but get is the accent, sorry, patch, and delete. So post is most commonly used to create new resources, the part of the CRUD, the create part. So for example, creating a new virtual machine. The get part, most commonly to read a representation of a resource. For example, how many virtual machines or the memory size of a VM. Patch, most commonly used to modify or update an existing representation of a resource. For example, adding more memory to a virtual machine. And delete, anybody want to have a guess at what delete does? Yeah, deletes. Now, there has to be a word of caution with delete. There is no confirmation or are you sure box pops up when you're using REST APIs. Once you press the delete button, once you send your call, it's gone, unless you've got very good backups. I can recommend a couple of good software packages for that. But yes, delete, use it with caution. Just be 100% sure you definitely want to delete that because it's not going to come back. Okay? So let's break down the makeup of a REST call. So we start with the call, funnily enough. So this would be the commander language. So it would either be curl or invoke REST method, or depending on your programming language you're using, this would be the first part here. Second part would be your endpoint, the unique resource identifier to the resource. The resource itself, or the data being controlled. And the method or the action you want to perform, so that would be post, put, get, whatever. Header for some additional parameters, and then also the body, which will also contain parameters. But that depends on the API author, whether they need you to specify your parameters in the header or within the body of your API call. So here's an example. So invoke REST method, we're using Powershell to make a call. So this is our call. The endpoint is my vCenter in the lab, looking at the VMs. I want to read how many VMs I have. And the headers, I've built a session talking with my session token, which I'll talk about later on. So talking about REST HTTP, so we can use HTTP status codes. When we make a call, we'll get a status code back. Typically 9 or 10. There's one missing up there. Does anyone have a guess what's missing? No? 404. Yeah. Not found. Got there, it got there. Okay, so let's talk about VMware sources of REST API. So back in 6.5, VMware released, in addition to their SOAP APIs, REST APIs. And it's built into every vCenter you have. The web client has access to that. It's a basic URL, vCenter, your either IP or FDQN, /API Explorer. It's a built-in REST API browser, documentation via Swagger UI, really handy little tool to have. Works with any browser or client or application that supports HTTP or HTTPS. And that's what it looks like. Okay. So last month, beginning of last month, March, yeah, VMware released an update of their Fling. Does everybody know about the Flings, the VMware Flings? Yeah, labs.vmware.com. So they had the HTML5 client was first released as a Fling. They're still developing that. So version 4.1 or 4.0 was released beginning of March. And as part of that, they released an API Explorer built into the HTML5 client. So, yeah, version 4 executes the REST calls within your vSphere client, and you can download your responses, your JSON, JavaScript object notation-based responses. And that's it, built in there. Along with the code capture, there's another new one as well. See this one here? So this is the API Explorer. This is the new version. This one here, a little bonus, is code capture. This lets you record actions within your vSphere client and then see the resultant PowerShell commands on that, and it allows you to download that. So that's a pretty cool little tool as well. But the API Explorer is a new one, just released last month. Okay, fingers crossed. Here we go, live demo time. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to access the Swagger UI, show you how to use calls within that and what you can do within the Swagger UI. So we're going to go in here. I'm going to, this is my Revelo. As a vExpert, we get access to 1,000 CPU hours with the Revelo, so we can build labs in their cloud. So this is part of this. So this is my top page for my vCenter, and down here we have browse vSphere REST APIs. Click on that, that will take you to /API Explorer. Oh, sorry. Duplicate. Yeah, there we go. So I'll go back to that. I will go. Okay, so here we are, top level of my vCenter, and down here is the link to browse vSphere REST APIs. Click on this link, and we're going to take us into this is the Swagger UI. We need to log in, so just your normal whatever administrator. Log in, authenticate. And then you can make live calls above this. You can browse through and see all the API calls you can make against your new vSphere. So we can go down and I can list, you can expand this, click on this, and it will give you an explanation of what kind of responses you can make, what you can do in the calls. Fill in specific parameters if you wanted to within the calls, give you an idea of the syntax for your API calls. So for example, my lab has NFS storage, so I'm just going to filter down for NFS. There's no point looking for VMFS, there's none. And I'm going to come down here, and then right at the bottom, you will get an idea of what the response messages are. So, and if you carry on down, there should be a big blue button that says try it out. So you can try this out live against your environment. So if I click on try it out, that, believe it or not, is you making your first REST API call to your vSphere environment. So the other cool thing is it gives you the curl, the associated curl command with everything, all your filters. So you'll notice it's got the filters, everything's built into there already. And then if I come down a little bit again, there we go. This is my live data back from my lab, talking about my NFS data stores. Okay, I can see the size, I can see how much free space, and the name within my vCenter. So just to give you an idea, there's same thing within the vSphere client, but this is through the Swagger UI. Now, there's a pretty cool thing you can do with the curl command. Who uses Visual Studio Code here for doing all the coding? Just about everybody, no? Visual Studio Code? It has a REST API plugin. So if I take my curl command here, and I go to my Visual Studio Code, everybody see that okay? Yeah. Paste that in there. I can run this curl command from Visual Studio Code against my environment. So if I do Control-R, run, and it should, fingers crossed, return the same thing. So I can use Visual Studio Code, or I can use my Swagger UI. Can everybody see that okay? Or maybe highlight it, that'll be a bit better. So it's the same information from here in the response body. Same information. Okay, that's a bonus tip for you. You can keep that one. I would have shown you the developer, but my HTML5 client decided to throw a sickie. It wasn't very well last night, so I had to scrap that. But it's the similar thing. You go in, developer code, and away you go. So if I do that, that's back on there. Cool. Okay, so what tools can you use for making your REST calls? So what typically I like to use is Postman. It's an application. Postman, yeah? Everybody familiar with Postman? Yeah, good. Insomnia is another one. It's quite more lightweight compared to Postman. Postman's good for the collections. I really like that. It's a really good part of it. If you're a cool, hip and trendy Mac user, there's PAW. You can use that. Good old-fashioned curl if you've that way inclined, but probably not. And the last one, anybody want to take a guess? Last one? Just, no? Powershell. Okay. So there's another list here. Good, amongst those, there's maybe another 3 or 4 tools you can use to develop your REST API calls. So, talked about PowerShell there. Within PowerShell, there are 2 commands you would typically use for making REST API calls. So you have invoke web request, and you have invoke REST method. And there's a difference between the 2 of them that needs to be considered. So invoke web request, there's more to it than this, but really to simplify it, to understand it better, in my head anyway, hopefully it helps you, is that if you use invoke web request with your API calls, you're going to get a raw output, including your headers and everything. Why is that important? Because some API authors have access tokens or session tokens returned in their header. So this would be the call, this is all the header information, and everything else. And there's one there, the content. That is actually the token key that I'm really looking for when I'm making that call. For example, Veeam Enterprise Manager, they do their token requests within the headers. So you have to be able to get the header information out to get the token to pass it on to your next calls. If you use invoke REST method, it's effectively a JSON formatted output, only what we ask for. So if I run the same call above using invoke REST method rather than invoke web request, all I'm going to get is my session key. That's all I'm going to get. Okay? Just the requested information, just like that. So let's talk about session tokens. So that when you're making REST calls with VMware, validated credentials create a session token. That session token is located in the value field in the previous slides shown you there. And there we go. That is the token, the session token. Subsequent calls must contain session tokens. So your first call would be to authenticate and exchange your authenticated credentials for a session token. Then when you're making subsequent calls, you don't have to put your credentials in. You can use a session token every time. It must be contained within the header of the call. Again, I was talking, you can define parameters within header or the body. With VMware, they've implemented a header of the call. You need to specify the key using VMware API session ID. And it becomes invalid after 60 minutes of inactivity. So after 60 minutes, if you don't do anything after 60 minutes, you're going to have to re-authenticate, generate a new session key, and then bring that in. So this is an example of just breaking it up there. So I've just used an array there. VMware API session ID, then my session ID, and then this is me making the call. So invoke REST method, pointing at my VM, my vCenter, looking at the VMs, and then within the headers, I've specified that token session. Okay, another live demo. Right, let's go and see if we can do the same. So doing exactly that, we're going to use follow the CRUD, the create, read, update, and delete. We're going to use these verbs to do exactly that on this with the VMs. So if I go in here, so this is going to be in PowerShell. So I have just to show you, my vCenter. My VMs are all tied away in the folders, nothing there. So I'm going to create let's create a new VM. So what I'm going to do is this header here, this small section here, it's just a bit of JSON formatted, just specifying my VM. It's a very basic. You can go a lot more in depth. You can specify just about every variable within your VM within there. This is just small. We're going to call it VMUGIT VM1. Give it an OS. Put it on this data store. Put it on this group, resource group, and give it a size of 1 gig of RAM. That's it. Okay, so I'm going to cheat a little here because I have all this. So I'm just defining my session, make my call, And then what I'm doing here in this next section is I'm just building my session token up. So I've got my username and password. I'm not going to show you my username and password, obviously. Convert it into base 64, and then generate the. Okay, that's my session. So my session is. That's my session token. So I have to use that every time I need to use a call, okay? So I've just put it in a variable so I can call it easier next time. So let's create a VM. So there we go. That's my invoke REST method, unique resource identifier, which is my vCenter VM method post. So we're creating a new VM. The headers are using my session, got my authenticated session token. Content type is just telling it's JSON, and then the body is using that, using this text file just to define the parameters of the VM. So if I run that against my, there we go. It should come back and give me a VM ID. There we go. So created. So I can verify that that command has successfully run, not by going in there, but by going in here. So there we go. That's the VM created, just using a REST call. So we've noticed that the REST call is successful, and we can verify that it's given it the 1 gig of RAM. There we go, 1 gig of RAM, allocate to that VM. So we could verify that in REST as well. We could say, well, hang on, I don't want to have to go do my REST call and then go to vCenter and then come back. Within REST, I can do a. Now, see if I can spot the deliberate mistake coming up. So if I do that, I'm going to get a 404 not found because I haven't defined the VM that was created there. So there's a tip for you. 404 usually means it's not created. So if I go back in here and use VM 1508, there we go. So I verified the size of that RAM that's allocated to that VM. Using a REST call is 1 gig of RAM. Then user complains, I don't need 1 gig of RAM, I need 2 gig of RAM. Okay, let's go. Here we go. So what you could do this time is I'm going to use, so I've used a post here to create a VM. I'm now going to use it, and I've used a get to read the information. I'm now going to update that. So an update is, again, I've just specified a small bit of JSON code, just saying, here's the new size. 2 gig, let's give them 2 gig of RAM. So let's go down. So we're going to use the patch command this time. And then need to go back and get the VM name. 1508. Boom. Done. So again, I can verify that in vCenter. I can go back to my vCenter. I can see the virtual machine was reconfigured down the bottom here. I can also go in and verify that that now has 2 gig of RAM allocated to that VM. Again, I can verify that with a get command. I can just do a read and verify there that's the new value of the memory allocated there. So I've now done a create or a post. I've done a read, which is a get command. I've done an update, which is a patch command. So now let's get rid of it. Let's get rid of it. So here we go. Very dangerous. Don't try this at home, folks. I'm going to delete. And you'll notice that there is no, are you sure? Click here to say yes. 1508, gone. That VM is now gone. Completely gone. Unless you've got backups, it isn't coming back. Okay? That was that easy. Click and away you go. Too easy, yes, too easy. Far too easy. Okay, so that's us. We've used the verbs, and we've went through the whole CRUD: create, read, update, and delete. Okay. Postman, all right. Okay, sorry, I missed out Postman. Sorry, my apologies. So Postman, similar kind of thing. So the first thing you have to do is you have to log in, create your session. So I'm going to create my session. I'm going to get my key. I've got a little bit of code that runs in the background that will take that key and apply it as a global as a global entity. But I could do the same things now. I can do the same things as a Swagger UI. I can go through and list all my VMs on my system. Here's all my VMs within there. I can, what else? Let's have a look at the data stores. So we can do the list. We could do the same thing. We could do updates. We can do deletes, but let's not. Little bit of tip for the Postman users. You know about the code button that's hidden down here? So if you're making a REST call within Postman and you need to convert it to curl or Python or whatnot, if you click on the code button, it will bring up the curl equivalent. You can change that to whatever. Take your, whatever your flavor of poison is, go for it. It's in there. Sorry? PowerShell, no, that's the one thing it doesn't have. No, the PowerShell does not have it, which is annoying. Okay, let's go back to the slides. So we've done that, that's an example. Okay, so let's do a practical use, which we've just done. We've created a VM, we've read it, we've updated it, and we've deleted it. Okay, everybody know who this is? No? MacGyver? Yeah? Yeah. I got a row last night. I was at a meal with Emma Eunice, who's doing another session next door, and when he saw this slide, he went, hang on a minute, is that a bomb with VMware's name on it and APIs on it? It says you can take that one of two ways. It's very creative, or it could be downright dangerous. So take it as you see the best way. So let's make something else. Let's do another practical use. I like dashboards. I like collecting metrics, and I like dashboards. So I found this module, PowerShell Universal Dashboards, last year. It's a PowerShell module. It lets you build interactive HTML dashboards using PowerShell. It's pretty cool. They have a community edition and they have a paid edition. It's $99 a year, and you can use it on as many servers as you want. It's pretty cool stuff. So let me just show you. I'm just going to make a basic. I've got a basic dashboard here that I've run, that I put together. All the information is being pulled back using REST API calls. So if I show you the code, it's horrific code. Everybody's code's horrific, isn't it? If you write code and you let somebody else see your code, you're scared to show them it. So all I'm doing is running a couple of PowerShell dashboards, collecting my VCSA stats, like number of hosts, etc., number of VMs, data stores, that kind of thing. Okay, so if I run that now, so yeah. You can run it, it's web-based, so you could run it in Azure, you can run it in wherever, AWS, whatever, you can host these yourself, but you can do a local host, it's 888, you can define ports, it's quite good. And this is just purely pulling API information out, so the values in here are all API calls, so number of hosts is 3, I've got 8 data stores, VM count 7, this is my NFS store, so I've got 27 gig used, 492, pretty cool. VMware inventory, again, it's just an API call, bring back the list of my VMs and specifying which headers I want to see. Pretty cool part is I can filter that down, so if I want to see all my powered off VMs, I just type in off, it will filter it down through the dashboard as saying off. If I want to see how many VMs have 2 gig of RAM, 2048, if I want to see how many I've got 4 gig of RAM, oh, not that much, 496, that kind of thing. Same with my port groups, that kind of stuff. So that's just that's the kind of thing you could do with REST APIs, you know. That's purely REST API information, pulling back and doing that. There's other parts I can check, I've been working on this. I can query through the REST APIs, the VCSA appliance itself. I can check the services are running on the VCSA and output them into whatever you want. So it's entirely up to you what you want to use or do them for. There's no stringent rules saying you must do this, you must do that. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so that's just a practical use of REST API calls. So let me give you top tips that I've learned. Use Postman collections, very useful. It means it allows you can, as you saw in the folders there, you can see the different calls, whether it's an authentication call or if it's a VM call or a data store call. Syntax is very important if you're talking about JSON. Use a JSON validator, for example. Sorry. These little blighters here cause you no end of hassle. If you've got a comma in the wrong place, that can screw up your whole REST API call. So use a JSON validator. You may run into SSL errors. you can ignore it, and Postman allows you to do that. I've also got a small piece of code that lets me do it in the PowerShell, but use it in dev only, or your test labs. And top tips 2, look for help. Code.vmware, absolutely, go there. There's a REST API collection, Postman collection. Slack, anybody use Slack? Yeah, everybody uses Slack. There's a code.vmware Slack. Kyle is on there quite a lot. Kyle Ruddy. Want to learn more? Pick a vendor. They usually have bringing in new REST APIs, documentation. VMware, Revelo, Veeam, Rubrik are pretty good at it. Some of them have the Swagger UI, and reach out to the V community. Absolutely, everybody's in it together to do it. If I can recommend a couple of sessions to look at, Chris Waller of Rubrik did a really good introduction to REST APIs that helped me a lot with my journey. REST API tutorials are a really good place to go as well. And then that should be it. Okay, can't do it without a meme. We've got questions, right? I have got 3, I don't want to say prizes, but giveaways here. You need to ask a question. So I have Scottish VMUG pen, notebook, Scottish VMUG mug for keeping, they're probably about espresso or double espresso size, and some whiskey from Scotland, proper whiskey, none of your cheap rubbish. This is decent whiskey. So, anybody got any questions?